Welcome to Empowered by AI. I'm Michelle Muncie Silva. This podcast is for women building what's next and using AI with intention. In Season 7, you'll hear from founders, entrepreneurs, business builders who are redefining success, creating on their own terms, and moving with intention. We're learning from conversations about reinvention, identity, and taking action because every episode gives you ideas you can use immediately. Let's get into it.
All right, Erica Rooney in the hello. Hey, so good to have you. I am looking forward to this conversation. I want to give you a chance to introduce yourself to everyone, and then we're going to dive into all that is you because, ladies, we have an author and founder in the house, and she is going to tell us all about her journey. So, Erica, I'll let you kick it off.
Oh, man. I used to be a chief people officer in tech, and it was super easy back then because people would say, Erica, tell me about yourself. What do you do? And I would say, chief people officer. And they would be like, great. Don't want to talk to you anymore. Gotta go. And it's like, now I do all of these other things. And I got here by way of HR a little bit. But yeah, I turned out of the corporate America world and started living my own dream. But that was after I did my full entire challenging climb up the ladder myself. But I started in health and wellness and spent almost a decade there before I hit my first glass ceiling, where they basically said, hey, you're great, but we don't have a spot for you anymore. And I remember at that time thinking, like, how can this be like the top when I'm in my like mid 20s? Like, what is even going on here? And that's when I pivoted into HR for a lot of different reasons. And I wanted the flexibility for when I had kids. I could work from home if I needed to. I wanted to be able to have a ladder to climb. I wanted something that was transferable. But what I really loved about it was it pulled this red thread from the fitness world that I started in, from helping people achieve their fitness goals into helping people achieve their career goals. And so that red thread of helping people really pulled through. And as I climbed the ladder into corporate C-level leadership roles, it became helping these organizations lead with people first mindsets and continuing to help them. And so the red thread is I always love helping people. But my climb up the corporate ladder is very similar and not unfamiliar to many women who sat in these high level positions, in that it is very much a bro culture, right? There is sexism. There is people who ask you ridiculous questions like, who's babysitting your kids if you go on this trip? And I'm like, their father is, and that's not babysitting, that's parenting. I remember one time not being invited on a trip to France, of all places, because I was having a child. Like I had just had a kid, and they were like, she won't want to go because she's got a new baby at home. It wasn't my decision. They didn't let me make it myself. And I saw all of these struggles, and I did not want the next generation to have to deal with that, right? I saw firsthand as a chief people officer the pay gaps that existed, the leadership gaps, the representation gaps. And I couldn't imagine that little baby, who was a girl that I was holding, would have to go through all the same BS that I had to go through. And at that point in time, we were looking at this pay gap of 132 years. And I just couldn't imagine that I was having a child who would never see pay equality. At that, it was bananas to me. And so I exited corporate. I started my own company called Her Collective, which is all about helping women climb the corporate ladder in a way that is authentic to them. And then, girl, you know what happened? The AI era arrived
With bells on.
full force, right? Full force. And interestingly enough, I was actually on the front end of it. And I happened to just a little bit of luck, I think a little bit of leaning in and curiosity. And I started using AI and ChatGPT when it was like first out. Very, people were like, I don't know what that is. I'm not going to play with it. I got my Google. And because I had a really amazing business partner in my corner, he started to notice that I was using these tools. And he actually said, like, hey, Erica, I want you to be a podcast host with me on this AI voice or victim podcast. And Michelle, I was like, ain't no way. I don't know anything about tech. I don't know anything about AI. That's not my jam. And he goes, think about it for a little bit. And I thought about it and I started recognizing and seeing the things that he saw in me that I couldn't see in myself. And I was like, I'm going to test this sucker out. And now I am all in on AI. My second book, which came out on June 1st of 2026, is called The AI Gap, Women, AI, and the Next Great Leap Forward. And it ties together all of that work that I had already put into the women's empowerment space into what I think is going to be either the greatest opportunity for women or it's going to set us back. And that's kind of Erica Rooney in a nutshell.
And that is an amazing journey. And I'm wondering if you feel like there are certain things that have surprised you along this way about building your business and going in with this new entrepreneurial mindset. Are there certain things that surprised you emotionally about building a business, structurally about building a business? That shift from corporate industry into the free flow of entrepreneurship can sometimes be kind of shocking for some. What
Yeah.
surprised you the most?
Yeah. I'll attack this structurally first and then I'll tap onto the emotion. But from the structural standpoint, if you've never started a business, you've never started a business. You don't know what goes into it. And I was just trying to figure it out as I went. And that took a lot more time and resources and energy than I think I really realized. And, unless you have somebody who is telling you and showing you the roadmap, you're out there building blindly, right? And if you are the founder and you are just getting started, guess what? You're also the CMO, you're also the CFO, you're also the head of HR, you're also in charge of sales, by the way. And structurally, you're like, how can I even make this work? And that was a big challenge for me, was really figuring out how do I get all of these systems up and running in a way that can grow and sustain a company that, maybe one day I transact. I don't know at this point, but I know I wanted to have options. And so learning all of that and figuring out that structure was a bigger learning curve than I think I had anticipated.
Do you think that maybe some people misunderstood your decision as they watched you kind of work through some of that? Because a lot of times we're being raised by boomers that are just so into the career and the industry life because that served them.
Yeah. Well, what I'll tell you is I grew up with a father who ran and owned a paint manufacturing business. And so he was an entrepreneur, but not by choice. And so he actually fell into this role kind of like, if you think about old Southern families, the firstborn son always takes the father's business and runs it, and that's the expectation. Well, my dad was the second-born son, and the firstborn son tragically died right before I was born, which thrust my dad into this position and this role that he never thought he would have and he never wanted. And so I grew up in this household where being an entrepreneur was never a good idea. And I specifically remember having this moment where he came home from work one day and was like, never run your own business because you always have to pay all of your people first. You never get a raise yourself. And I remember thinking, ooh, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to have a reliable paycheck. And that felt like the win. And sure enough, I did what every firstborn daughter, high achieving girl does. And I climbed all the way to the top of the corporate ladder. And there was a lot of people, I still think to this day, there probably still are a lot of people that don't understand my decision because I went from making multiple six figures, like leaving a very lucrative job where I could work from home. But what people also don't understand is how miserable I was and how much I didn't have control over my day to day, what was going to fall in my lap, what wasn't. And there was a lot of fallout. Emotionally, mental health wise, physically, my marriage was suffering. Like it just wasn't a good situation. So on the outside, yes, I had it all, but that wasn't the kind of life I think any of my family would have wanted me to live, And so they wanted to get on board, but they had a hard time understanding that. because they also had never made as much money as I was making. And so for them, they're like, why would you walk away from that? It'll never happen again. And that was a big challenge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember my mom finally coming to an understanding where she was like, I don't know what you'd be like if you stayed. I remember her finally coming to that because I was having doubts. I was looking, God, should I do this? Am I making the biggest mistake of my life? What am I doing? I'm not sure. And she just finally had gotten to a point where she had really started listening to me. And it was like, okay, I see where you're coming from, but, and it became that, okay, but what's really the better option for the whole you?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I was so grateful for that perspective. When I myself was beginning to have my own doubts, it was like, okay, no, that's true. There's more than just the corporate march in place, earn X dollar going on here. Yeah.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting that we train people so much to just, this is the success path, follow the corporate ladder, do these things at the expense pretty much of everything you stand on in many cases, right? And when you think about success and happiness,
Mhm.
we in the past have always hung that on a job title and having secure paychecks and all these other things. And we don't necessarily factor in the happiness as a piece of success.
Mhm.
And that has been, as you know, to answer the second part of your question about the emotional journey and the challenges, that has been a big wake up call for me, has been to truly reevaluate what my definition of success is. And it's still changing, all the time. And I have to constantly recalibrate. But I will tell you, if you really want to get to know yourself, start a business. Like, go all in, because you go learn each this or breathe. Yes. And I'll never forget, Michelle. It had to have been like my first month after I've quit my job as a full-time entrepreneur. And, you feel that pressure to do something with yourself and to get traction immediately because we want that instant gratification. And I had a really awesome speaking gig lined up, and it was thrown together last minute. So I had to kind of work at risk. I had to start prepping and doing the things for this engagement. And I remember that I quoted my price. They said, Erica, we can't afford that. And I said, no worries. I'm flexible. We'll figure it out. They said, great. They sent me back the SOW, and it had the full price. And I thought, oh, okay. So I signed my version of the DocuSign and I sent it off. And then I didn't get it back. And then it was the Friday before I was supposed to do this event the next week. And I said, or I got a phone call from some dude I'd never heard of, never talked to. And he goes, yeah, we're not going to be able to bring you in. It's too much. And I said, what? And long story short, someone had heard my ask. They put it in there. They sent it off, but they did not go back and validate with the right approvals of what that actual price should be. And I mean, so there's 1,000,001 lessons in here, right, Michelle? My first lesson should have been, don't just take it as a gift and validate it and say, hey, while I love this fully quoted price here, I thought we settled on X. But the reason I share this story with you is because after that, I was like messy, depressy girl for a whole week. Like, could not get myself out of the funk. My husband was taking me to lunch. He's like, girl, you got to shake it off. And I finally, when I sat with it for a while, I realized that because this was like my first big thing as an entrepreneur, I had hung all of my metrics of success and all of my worth on that one gig and that one price. And when it got pulled out and ripped out from under me, it felt like the bottom had just fallen out and that it was validation that I would never be able to make it. And I mean, that is how it just sat on my heart for a long time. And I finally really had to do that deep work to realize, like, this one incident is just a blip on the radar, right? The timing sucks. Yeah. The feeling sucks. Yeah. But this is one blip. You learned a lesson and you have to move on. And so now, because of that lesson that I learned right from the bat, it's still something I have to remind myself of, but you cannot hang your worth, your emotions on external deals and price tags like that. And that was one of those big emotional shifts for me that I had to recognize, because in corporate, that deal got lost or that candidate didn't take that job, or no big deal, on to the next one. I'm still getting paid. I still have the title.
Yep.
But when it's tied to your work, your name, your brand, it just carries such a different weight. And so learning how to sit with both the wins and, the losses was, and still is, a big piece of that emotional entrepreneurial journey.
And what systems are you incorporating for yourself that are helping you continue to move forward when that confidence disappears?
Yes, I'm a big person on my own personal receipts, right? Like, what is the proof that I have done this? And of course, now, I've got some years under my belt and I can point to the big wins. And that always helps me. That reminds me. I also have to do a lot of mindset work. And so my mantra for the year, I don't do just one word, I do like a whole mantra. My mantra for the year is, what is meant for me will not miss me. And that alone gets me in the right mindset shift of, if a deal falls off, or if someone doesn't take me up on my sales offer, or if I put something out and it flops, I just remind myself that, hey, that was not for me. That is why it is passing on by, but it is keeping me open and available for what is meant for me. And I mean, it's a lot of mind twisting and mindset work, and reminding yourself to pivot, right? And to look at that other side of the coin.
And what do you think is the better part of entrepreneurship that people don't know about until they dive in?
Oh, I mean, there's so much that I absolutely love. And I mean, I'm a mom. I've got 2 kids. They're 11 and 8. And when I left corporate America and started this business, I made a very intentional choice that I would not take meetings after 2:30 my time, because that's when I got to get ready for carpool, get out the door, get these kids home, because I spent almost a decade straddling homework in corporate America.
Yep.
Homework and a CEO, and the context switching and the mental gymnastics of trying to appear like I was working like I didn't have a kids, but then being a mom like I didn't have a job, was exhausting. And now that I am an entrepreneur, like, I get to make those decisions on how my business operates. If I want to take a meeting after 2:30 for whatever reason, that's my decision, but I don't do it from a place of obligation or pressure.
Uh-huh.
What does that
That's
mean? Well, I mean, I want to know from you, what has been your big...
that's the glory. That's the glory. Yeah, having the ability to set certain realities, like knowing when I am going to be on my A game, and knowing when it's going to be best for me to wrap up the day, knowing when I want to sit and soak up and learn, and knowing when I want to be actively engaged with others. That's been the joy, is like rediscovering that. The issue, though, that I'm finding is that for so many of us, we've spent way more years in corporate industry than we have in entrepreneurship, right? So there's a lot of what I call corporate residue that just kind of
Mhm.
clings to you. And I think you touched on that a little bit when you think about what you're defining as successful and what you're creating systems wise. I had way more time in industry systems than I've had in creating systems of my own.
Yeah.
And so it takes a hot minute to work through a little bit of trial and error and
Mhm.
realize, crap, I really wasn't at my best at, 5:30 in the evening running that session. Wait, why did I feel like I had to run that session at fucking birthing? It's like, wait a minute, starting to really reflect and ask yourself questions. It's like that has really begun to kind of open up, like remembering to ask why. Why do I feel like
Yeah. I think tapping into your own needs, like you said, how do you work best? I think that's a huge thing. And to your point, like, I will go out and I will do these all day AI trainings inside large companies where I am on and I am context switching from here to there and this tool and where are you and what step. And then I also do a lot of keynotes. So I'm on stage, pouring, giving, giving, giving. And in the corporate world, it would have been back to business as usual the next day, no breaks. And oh, by the way, you probably have 50,000 emails you need to catch up on. So you better get to that overnight because everything's urgent.
Yeah.
Whereas now, if I have a big keynote or an all-day training, I can make sure that I have that recovery time built in so that I don't feel so much pressure to jump onto the next meeting, because what happens then is the whole depletion cycle, right? I'm not working well because my brain is done. I'm doing poor work. It's taking me longer to do it. And then I just get backed up. And that was something I had to like teach myself was, guess what, Erica? You can take a Wednesday morning off if you want to. There's no police.
Yeah, they're not following you. No, 100%. They're not coming with you. In fact, they've already replaced you and moved on. So you might as well
What's how you move along?
Exactly. So I'm curious, when we talked about that first transition into entrepreneurship being bumpier than you expected, what was it that finally moved the needle for you towards the growth you see now? What do you feel like got you to where you are today?
I think it's a few things. I think community is a big one, right? Having people in your circle that you can lean on for advice or, hey, I want to ping this off of you, or what are you thinking? I'm feeling really stuck here. And also, they are there to be your support system and your motivation to keep moving forward, right? For when you do want to throw in the towel. Or if you're like me with a little sprinkle of ADHD and shiny object syndrome, they can be there to pull you back to center where they're like, no, girl, you said you were going to do this thing. Let's do this thing. So community has been extremely beneficial. But I also think just this mentality and an inner knowing that I can't fail has been extremely beneficial. And don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean I don't feel like a failure sometimes, but having this belief of like, okay, that really sucked. I was messy, depressy about that for a while, but like now I'm going to do these things or I'm going to try that thing. And just not being afraid to say yes, because there were so many moments in the beginning where I remembered pausing and being like, no, I don't need to do this, or like, I don't know that. I'm not going to experiment there, or I'm not going to take this risk. And you have to lean into those moments sometimes, and you have to really be okay if it does fail, because you know you're just going to do the next thing to keep going forward. That's a hard one.
No, it is. It is. And I think it's harder than people expect.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that comes into play that is involving that self-reflection and that awareness of when are you counting yourself out before anybody else even gets the chance to.
Yeah.
Because there's a risk there. And we're risk averse at some level. All of us really are. I mean, at some level, some of us fight it better than others. But it's really about making that leap. And what do you feel like you'd say to someone who's listening to this right now and they're thinking about making that leap?
I would say have a plan first, right? Like, don't just quit and go out there, right? When I was getting ready to leave corporate America, I had been thinking about it for a long time, and I had been putting the pieces into place of like, what would I do? How would I do it? I had the conversations with my husband. What will our finances look like? We brought in our financial planner who had to talk my husband off the ledge, right? Because he also had gotten very used to my lovely salary. And even my financial planner had to pull him aside, and he was like, look, you guys have been saving for this. You banked your retentions. Like, you have X amount of dollars in your savings. And he did this. He goes, so what is the math? Like, what is that dollar amount that you need to have every month so that you feel secure and you're not having to live like you got to eat ramen noodles for the rest of your life? Okay. And my husband gave that number. And then he goes, okay, so you have your savings. You could go for 6.5 years without Erica making a single dollar before your savings ran out. And so that was kind of like a nice little like reality check for him in the fact of like, okay, it's not going to be as bad as you think. But I've got a good girlfriend who wrote a book called Now, Near, Next. And she talks a lot about how we always plan for that very next step. Plan 2 steps ahead, right? Think out the scenarios. If I quit, what happens to my insurance? Like lay all of those big building blocks out, but also just start doing the work while you are in corporate, because then it makes that transition into entrepreneurship so much easier. And usually if you're going to be an entrepreneur, I feel like you are very ambitious. You're a hustler. Like you want to get out there and do the dang thing. How about you just be average at your day job? And then you take all that extraness that you have because you're such an ambitious hustler and you apply it to what a woman inside my community, her name is Susan, she calls her joy job. So she tries to be average at her day job. It doesn't really work. She just got promoted. But she takes all that extra energy and she puts it into her joy job. And so she's building that runway before it gets to the end. And I think that is so important for a multitude of reasons. One being, you can never have a full safety net, right? Like when you are stepping out and you have these regular paychecks, but guess what? Corporate ain't secure. People are getting riffed all the time. But you can have at least some of the foundational things down. Like make sure you have your LLC mapped out. If you have a name that needs to be trademarked, like get that process started. Get a corporate attorney or, someone who can help you actually set up your business in the right way before you leave so that you're not doing that on day one or trying to figure it out. And I think that can be really helpful for people who are sitting there thinking, I want to take the leap. Have a little bit of a runway first and then dive in.
Yeah. So for the woman that is listening to this and she's like, I want to get more of the magical one and only Erica Rooney into my life. Let's talk a little bit about how they connect with you, how they can catch some of the things you've written about. Let's give them all the details.
Oh my goodness. Well, I tell everybody the easiest place is to find me, my other permanent address. I'm in North Carolina, but the other permanent address is LinkedIn. So hit me up there. I'm always on the LinkedIn. But I do run a community called Her Collective. We meet weekly on Tuesdays at 12 o'clock, and we talk about all things corporate, all things growing your business, all things AI fluency. It is essentially a container of crazy ambitious women who know that they're meant for more in this life and they want to get there. And we help them do it in a way that is authentic to them. But you can also check out, I have 2 books. The first one is called Glass Ceilings and Sticky Floors, which Mel Robbins picked up and endorsed. So that was a super cool thing. And then the one that is most recent is the AI Gap, Women, AI, and the Next Great Leap Forward. Feel free to check those out. You can get them on Amazon, wherever books are sold. But I also have 2 podcasts. I have the Glass Ceilings and Sticky Floor podcast, and then I have an AI podcast. And if you just search by my name, they will all come up. But check out those places. My website is my full name, ericaandersonrooney.com. And yeah, tell me you heard me on this podcast.
Oh, love it. Thank you so much, Erica. It has been an absolute joy.
Oh my gosh. Well, you're a real treat too. I mean, I could have turned around and asked you every single one of these questions. I love it.
Well, we like learning from you. So much appreciated.
Oh, thank you.
You've been listening to Empowered by AI, and I'm your host, Michelle Muncy Silva. If something from this episode clicked, don't let it stop here. Take one idea and try it out this week. And if you want to go deeper, head over to the Empowered by AI, the Slay Effect YouTube channel, where you can watch demos and walkthroughs from our guests today and so many others. Like, subscribe, and join us there so you don't miss out on what's coming next. All the links and resources are in the show notes. I'll see you next time.